I forgot to turn my camera on. And so this is an introduction to this series, Making Sense of World Religions. Today is Islam, Part 2. We're going to start off talking about Muhammad. Muhammad is considered by Islam to be God's prophet, the last in the line of prophets from Judaism through Christianity, including Moses and Jesus. And that Islam would say that Muhammad was the culmination of that lineage of prophets. Also God's messenger. So being a prophet and being God's messenger were two separate but irrevocable ways of looking and seeing Muhammad and what he did. It was Muhammad who received the visions that became the Quran, and whose example gives human beings the opportunity to know the right way to live. Muhammad was the religious, the political, and the military leader of a community state, and his teaching and examples took place in the context of and in response to a 7th century or 600s Arabian culture and society. That society was polytheistic, it was tribal, and it was multicultural, and those cultures included Judaism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism. There was little sense of a cosmic moral purpose or moral responsibility in that society, and yet for Muhammad, those things were vital. Muhammad was born in Mecca, Arabia, in 570 AD, or CE, in the non-sectarian way of following those years. He was orphaned at an early age and raised by his uncle, who was a well-respected tribal elder. Though he was illiterate and poor, Muhammad earned his living as the business manager to the caravans of a wealthy widow named Khadijah. Arabia was located along a trade route between two powerful but fading empires, Byzantia and Persia. There was a constant tension between the two empires and also within the tribal life of Arabia. So remember, Byzantia was the Roman Empire that was transferred from Rome to Constantinople in about 200 years, well, not even that long, just 100 years before Muhammad was born. Muhammad married Khadijah when he was 25 and she was 40. She was his only wife for the 24 years they were married. He had the reputation of being honest and having integrity. But he was also a spiritual person, and he regularly retreated to a nearby hillside cave for personal reflection. His life of prayer was very important to him. One night in 610, he received the first of many visions from God, Allah, through the angel Gabriel. Yes, the same angel that Jews and Christians follow. This night was called the Night of Power and Excellence. Muhammad was commanded to recite what he had heard and remember it exactly. He continued to receive these visions for the remainder of his life, the next 22 years. Remember, Muhammad was illiterate, and so he remembered these by reciting them, by memorizing them completely. I think the chances are very good that he used a scribe then to write down what he had recited. But after being assured by his wife that he was not crazy, she became the first convert to Islam, which was an effort to reform Arabian society, much the same way that old prophets did and attempted to do in Israel. So the revelation to Muhammad came in the context of a warlike 7th century Arabia. His efforts to implement the revelation came with resistance from those in power. They didn't much care for what he did, as is often the case with reformers. And after 10 years of persecution and resistance in Mecca, Muhammad and those early Muslims moved to Medina. And that's where Muhammad served as prophet, as political ruler, as military commander, as chief judge, and as lawgiver. During these 10 years, Muhammad experienced the night journey on which he was taken by Gabriel to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount, the site of the great Jewish temples. And while there, Muhammad climbed a mystical ladder, and he encountered prophets from Moses to Jesus along that route. And he then entered God's presence, and he learned about the Salat, that is the 5 times a day prayer. Eventually, when Muhammad had made some peace with Mecca, he determined that the Kaaba, the small house in Mecca, which is purportedly to have been a home built by Abraham and Ishmael, he cleansed it of all the gods, little g gods, and it became the destination for Islam's Hajj, the pilgrimage. Muhammad and Khadijah had 2 sons who died in childbirth and 4 daughters. While in Medina, Islam transformed from a religion only to a whole political system. Muhammad ruled that community. The system allowed Jews and Christians to live in peace as long as they were loyal and paid a tax. Eventually, hostilities with Mecca led to hostilities between Muslims and some Jews. And by the end of his life, Muhammad's army had subdued Mecca and really all of Arabia. Muslims believe that the Quran represents both the original and the final declaration of God to humankind. And in that sense, they saw Islam as the oldest rather than the newest of the monotheistic faiths. Conflict arose when Muhammad died about who would succeed him as the leader of Islam. The majority group, called the Sunnis, chose his uncle and close friend, Abu Bakr. And since he was the most qualified, they felt, and since he had been Muhammad's trusted advisor, Sunni meant followers of the example. The minority Shia group thought that it should be a hereditary succession, and they supported Ali, who was Muhammad's first cousin and his closest male relative. Shia meant literally party of Ali. After several leaders who were called caliphs, Ali finally did become a caliph 35 years later after Muhammad's death. But sadly, he was assassinated soon thereafter. The differences between Sunnis and Shias are primarily political. They're not theological. Now, the Quran is considered by most Muslims to be the literal words of Allah, the way many people think of the Bible. It was given through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad. It was recited by Muhammad to be sure that it was accurate. And then it was preserved in written form by scribes in Arabic, which was considered the holy language. It is a record of a series of revelations from God to Muhammad over a 22-year span, from the night of power to the end of Muhammad's life. Muslims consider the Quran a miraculous text that helped shape the grammar and the syntax of Arabian language or Arabic language. Beautiful poetry. So, as I said, the Quran was written in Arabic, and it continues to be the official language of Islam. Similarly, the way that Hebrew has been for so long the official language of Judaism, and in some ways, Greek, the official language of Christianity, because that's what most of the Christian scripture was originally written down as, what people spoke at the time. The text of the Quran was preserved in written and oral form during the Prophet's life, but it was only collected and compiled in the current format some 10 to 12 years later under the reign of the third Caliph Uthman ibn Affan, 644 to 656. It was organized then with longer chapters. The first section, the longer chapters, were the ones from the experiences of Muhammad, the visions, while they were in Medina. And then the second section, which had shorter chapters from the time in Mecca. Muslims memorize Quranic verses in Arabic. It's vital for use in daily prayers. The Quran begins, "In the name of God, the merciful and compassionate." The Quran accepts the Torah and the New Testament as revelations from God, but that they had become corrupted over time. That was their belief. The example, seeing Jesus as the Son of God, or God the Son, including the theology of the Trinity. I saw that as a corruption of the original. The Quran was sent to be a corrective to the Christian and the Jewish scriptures that they believe had been corrupted. The Quran consists only of 114 chapters, some 6,000 verses. It's relatively short, shorter even than the New Testament, much more shorter than the Old Testament. Islam sees itself as a natural successor to and corrective of Christianity, much the same way that Christianity saw itself as the natural successor and corrective to Judaism. The Quran, like Christian and Jewish scripture, assumes three realms: heaven, earth, and hell, the underworld. Two types of beings, humans and spirits. And the spirits include angels, jinns, from where we get the word genie, and devils, including Satan. Adam, as the first man, received God's spirit, and so they do not believe in original sin. So God, the Creator, is central to the Quran's worldview. In the Quran, God is named some 2,500 times. Allah. Allah is all-powerful, transcendent, that is above knowing, beyond our ability to know, all-knowing, sustainer, the ultimate judge, but also merciful and compassionate. Jesus is seen as a prophet, as a human being. Jesus as divine was considered idolatry. There are no images of God, no graven images. That's very important. You won't find images of God in mosques, and very few images of human beings in Islamic art. The Quran does not reveal God, but does claim to reveal God's will. Okay, so to conclude this part of Islam, poverty and social justice in the context of 7th century Arabia are major themes of the Quran. The Quran asserts the responsibility of the rich for the poor, and that's why the tithe that's given was designed to be used to help the poor. The equality and status of men and women, tolerance for other faiths. Men and women are seen to be equal in the eyes of God. Man and woman were created to be equal parts of a pair. That's not how we often think that the Quran reads, but it does. Men and women are equally responsible for promoting a moral order and adhering to the 5 pillars of Islam. Love and justice are the signs of God in family life, not cruelty. The best of you is seen by who is best to his wife, Muhammad said. There is to be no compulsion in religion. That's Quran chapter 2, verse 256. Jews and Christians are regarded as people of the book, people who have also received a revelation and a scripture from God. Surely the believers, the Jews and Christians, whoever believes in God, shall have their reward. Quran chapter 2, verse 62. So what about jihad? Well, jihad is a concept that we've heard a lot about in the last several years, primarily with the Iranian Revolution, with the 9/11 attacks. The greater jihad is the struggle for spiritual purity. It means to live a virtuous life and to extend the Islamic community through mission work. Lesser jihad is violent holy war in defense of Islam. This came out of the conflict with Mecca back in the 7th century and the struggle for that community to survive. It was later reinterpreted as an aggressive stance. Efforts have been made to define what is a just war. And you would say a just war is when peace is desired, the peace that is normal. If your enemy, the Quran chapter 8, verse 61 says, if your enemy inclines toward peace, then you must make peace. Islam forbids the killing of non-combatants as well as of women, children, monks, and rabbis, unless they take part in the fighting. Then all bets are off. Many of the sword verses in the Quran are often abused, taken out of context. The rationale during imperial Islam, during some of those centuries in which there was really an Islamic empire, for use of force to expand, because it was in the interest of the empire. So does the Quran condone terrorism? Historically and today, some Muslims have engaged in terrorism and have used the Quran to justify their actions. But the Quran does not advocate or condone terrorism. Islam does permit and even requires at times to defend itself, Muslims to defend themselves, their families, their religion, their community from aggression. Jews and Christians must ask, does the Bible condone terrorism? And we would say, no, of course not. But then we read stories like Joshua in the land of Canaan and others who practiced, if we were objective looking at that, who practiced terrorism. Certainly holy war is seen as God's will in the book of Joshua, for instance, and other places in the Bible. But the Quran says, whoever transgresses against you, respond in kind. So that's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But it's not condoning attacking another country, another people, because they are different. Okay, so that we'll finish the second part, and then next time we're going to take next week we'll follow a little bit of the history of Islam post Muhammad up to our present day. Thank you so much. Good to be with you.